We're very excited to be joined today by Scott Clark, head coach of Thompson University. Thank you, Scott, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So where'd you grow up and how'd you get started with basketball?
Yeah. I grew up in Kelowna, and I think it was about maybe the sixth grade that I was introduced to the game of basketball. I played everything growing up. Baseball. Football was really my first love as a kid. And then I think I got in trouble at school, to be quite honest. And my mom had to go to the parent-teacher interviews. I had a teacher by the name of Mr. Mowry. Mr. Dick Mowry was his name. And he told my mom that, I was a bit of a haywire kid a little bit, just from a standpoint of I was really competitive and just didn't really know how to harness my competitiveness. I probably still don't, to be quite honest. So, he said, hey, I really think that this would benefit Scott. I didn't really want to go out. So I don't think I went to the first practice, if I recall correctly. And then I think my mom, I think she withheld dinner because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So the next day I went to basketball and I fell in love with the game almost instantaneously. Just something about it. And you couldn't keep me out of the gym, whether it was getting there to the gym early in the morning, whether it was asking to go to the washroom, and I never really would go to the washroom. I'd just go down to the gym and play, and I'd get in trouble doing that. But it became a passion and a love almost from the get-go. And I'm sure glad that I had a teacher that took the time to, take interest in me, to introduce me to something that ended up being, obviously it's been a big part of my life, and basketball's been very good to me. And I try to keep that in mind whenever I'm teaching kids, whether it's at camp or with my university team.
So you're in high school, you're in Kelowna. What school are you going to? How are your teams like? What's kind of the progression throughout high school? Once you get the bug, does it start?
Yeah. I mean, I went to a junior high, Dr. Knox, which it exists to this day. They've moved schools, so I went to a grade 8, 9, 10 junior high, played the 8th grade, and then in the 8th grade, I played for a guy named Bryn Enns, and he was a North Delta grad, played at Medicine Hat. He ended up being a high school coach and teacher, I believe, out in Medicine Hat after. But and that was in the 9th grade. In the 8th grade, that was in the 10th grade. In the 9th grade, I played for a guy, trying to think, Randy White was his name, and he was a football guy. And in the 8th grade, there was I think it was a math and band teacher, and I can't really remember their names, but they spent a lot of time again with us. And it was just get to school early in the morning, play at lunchtime, play after school. And then right across from the junior high was another gymnasium, the rec center in Kelowna, Parkinson Rec Center. And we would play there every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sundays. And it's probably, there's kind of a pecking order now things are club, but back then, I can remember going as maybe an 8th grader, and we would go early. And then as the older kids and men showed up, we would have to get off the court. They would kind of take over the court. And then, I think maybe by the time I was a 9th grader, if I was there and they only had like 7 guys and they were going to play 4-on-4, okay, I'd get to play until an older guy showed up. And then by the time I was a 10th grader, I could compete with the men that played. And that was kind of how you learned to play. I think that if you turned the ball over, you got yelled at. If you took an ill-advised shot, If you didn't really move without the ball or have a defensive responsibility to you, they were fairly competitive games. And again, the older guys would yell at you, and that's the way the game was taught to me. I mean, outside of, what I learned in practices from coaches, but really, probably that's where we spent a ton of time playing. And then, when we were 11th and 12th graders, we were probably some of the better players. So we were always included in the games. And then whenever you went back in the summertime, or if you went back at Christmas, the very first place you would go is you would go to the rec center and play with. Want to show your friends, how your game had maybe developed while you were at university, and it was outside of the time that I'd played with organized teams. That's how you learn the game, and watching television probably. And then I went from junior high. I went to Kelowna Secondary School, KSS Owls, and it was a very competitive situation because it's still to this day, I think it's the largest high school in the province. And it was one of the larger high schools in the province at that time, and a bunch of junior highs fed into there. So, you had to be one of the top junior high kids at your school because there were going to be a whole bunch of junior high kids feeding in there. And, really only, probably only 6 11th graders were going to make the varsity team. And, I was lucky enough to make it. I started as an 11th grade kid. And I actually started it as a 12th grade kid. And then as, I was one of only 2, I believe, grade 12s on my senior year, and everybody else was an 11th grader. And then I kind of gave up my starting spot to one of my better friends, ended up starting in front of me, but maybe about 2 weeks later, he ended up having a knee injury, and I was reinserted into the starting lineup. But that was my high school experience. I played for Bill Lang, who was a really good leader. Really good teacher, demanded people, behave properly. And that's what happened in my 12th grade year. I had a lot of the kids that I played with, went kind of sideways and did certain things that they probably shouldn't do. And they ended up getting cut from the team. And they took a bunch of 11th grade kids that were very talented. And I was fortunate to be one of 2 12th grade kids to make the team, but everybody else was an 11th grader.
So you finish up your high school experience. You obviously have, I think a lot of the foundational principles that you learned at those times, they've still transitioned to who you are today. Just knowing, I learned a little bit about you, but those things are core beliefs that are still very important to you. So what happens after high school? What do you do after high school, and what do you study in university?
Well, I was a terrible high school student, to be perfectly honest. I just didn't see the point. I guess. I was the first person in my family to go to university. So, in high school, I thought the whole point was just hanging out with the guys and maybe going to the odd party and chasing the girls and things like that. But so then I had to go to college. So I went to college for my first year out of high school. And I wasn't even really certain I was going to do that. Might talk to my father and maybe thought about going into the trades of some sort. But a bunch of my friends were going to university, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do this as well. And so I could stay at home in Kelowna. I went to Okanagan College. They didn't have basketball at the time. And I mentioned to you that I played football growing up. So I played a year of junior football. One more year for a team called the Okanagan Sun. And then after that year, I knew what I wanted to do then. I didn't know I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be a high school teacher. So I went to the University of Victoria. I went there, I got my grades up, and I went into the faculty of education right away. I knew I wanted to do that, physical education and geography. I never made the varsity team. I made the junior varsity team. At the time, they were coming off 6 straight national championships, so they were a very good basketball team, and I wasn't a good enough basketball player to make the team. So, I ended up playing on the junior varsity team. I was, maybe one of the better guys. I played for a couple of years, and then one of my best friends to this day, a guy named Aaron Smith, who he teaches out in Salmon Arm, and he's a coach out there. And anyways, he was going away to play football, and he said, "Hey, I'm coaching this group of kids at Reynolds Secondary School. Would you care to maybe coach them?" And I knew that my days of being a basketball player were probably coming to an end, and I still had some competitiveness to me that I thought maybe there's a different way to kind of scratch my competitive itch, and that was coaching. And so I started coaching. I think it was my 3rd or 4th year of university, and then I was kind of off and running with that. I always was intrigued by wanting to learn more about the game. First as a player, like how maybe shooting the ball a bit better, or just I like to learn about the game. And then once I started coaching and really understanding that I didn't know very much at all, that part interested me, and trying to get a group of guys to come together and compete interested me a lot. So I did that, and I was fortunate to work. There was a lady by the name of Ann Lansdell. She was the teacher sponsor, and she treated me very well. Then after that, I ended up going out to Parklands and coaching with a guy named Joe Milligan, and he had done a very good job at Parklands High School out in Sydney. And I did that for a year, and then I graduated university. I was looking for a teaching job that was going to be full time, and I heard there was an opening up in Nanaimo, and I called the principal, and he said, "Yeah, come on up for an interview." And I went up for an interview and met with the principal, but more importantly, I met with the athletic department, and they grilled me about not just teaching, but what I was going to coach. I told them I was a basketball coach, and they said, "Well, whoever gets this job is also going to coach 8th grade volleyball." And I said, "Well, really, I'm just a basketball coach." And they said, "No, I don't think you heard me. Whoever gets this job is going to be the 8th grade volleyball coach as well." And I said, "Well, I guess I'll start trying to brush up on being a volleyball coach." And I coached 8th grade volleyball for a couple of years, and that was where I went from university into teaching, and I thought that was going to be my path, but I got sidetracked coaching along the way.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. It's funny hearing a couple of things you're saying. One of the things, obviously, they used to get teachers to actually do stuff, and so they were forced to do it. But also listening to you talk about the importance, how so many different people along the way had such an impact on you as a person, as a player, as a coach, and kind of guided you towards that journey. And it's kind of interesting to see what happens over the next 10, 15, 20 years with less teachers coaching as much as they do now, whether those stories are still going to be there or not. And it's kind of unfortunate to see it, because getting somebody like your teacher to get you to play basketball because he noticed something in the classroom with you, maybe that doesn't happen nowadays. And so it's kind of unfortunate to see how that path is going.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, again, the people I mentioned are people that were coaches for me, and I mean, I remember their names. I'm not sure I can remember who my 9th grade English teacher was, but people took interest in you, and that had a big impact on you as a young guy. And so, I mean, I never set out saying, "Hey, I want to be a coach and I want to impact people's lives." I like coach. There's a number of reasons I like to coach. I still like the feeling of winning and losing, and I like trying to help people get better. I do like, being able to perhaps hopefully have a positive impact on people. But I mean, going back to the 6th grade, and Mr. Mowry, just going back to teaching and things like that. One of the things was, we were in a gymnastics class, and actually Mr. Mowry called me last year, and I told him the story. He doesn't remember it, but I remember it quite vividly. So we're in a gymnastics class, and he's teaching the front head spring. So you're running up, you're hitting the vault, hands on the horse, and you're doing a front flip and landing on your feet. And I was a gangly kid that's 11, 12, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. And he said, well, come on. I said, no, I'm not doing it. And so anyways, physical education finished. We went back to the classroom. We all sat down, and I don't know what lesson went on, either math or English or whatever was going on. And he said, hey, Scott, I'll see you out in the hall right now. And I thought, oh, man, this guy. So I went out, and he said, hey, come with me. And we started walking down. The gym entrance to the gym was right by the office. I thought he was taking me down to the office. I had been there before. I'd gotten in trouble. Anyways, he was taking me back down to the gym. And there was probably all hell was breaking loose in the classroom. But he spent probably a half an hour and just kind of had a little bit of a build up to doing the front head spring. And it was just him and I. And part of the reason that I wouldn't do it was I was embarrassed that I couldn't do it. But he took time to, walk me through that. And, to this day, it's one of the lessons that I think that when I try to instruct, I try to teach in a very progressive manner so that people can have success early, and progress along. And hopefully there's some logic in the way that I'm teaching, whether it's skill or some sort of 2 or 3 man action. But obviously that's the heart of coaching, coaching is teaching. And, that lesson that I learned with Mr. Mowry back in the 6th grade, it still sticks in my head.
No, it's huge. The and the impact lasts forever, and you got to break it down, and that's exactly what coaching is, right? You got to break it down to little steps. Can we find the next thing? What's the next little step we got to add? So that's, it translates. So now, when does coaching start getting way more serious for you? What ends up happening, and what takes it to the next level to get you to university?
Well, so I graduated university, and anyways, I was just finishing my last class. It was a summer class, and we would play like crazy in the summertime still. I was, just finishing university. I don't know what I was, 21, 22. And so I was leaving the gym one day. And as I'm leaving the gym, I was walking up the stairs, and Ken Shields called up the stairs at Old McKinnon Gym, and he said, hey, Scott. I turned around. He said, you got a second to talk? I said, sure. And he said, hey, listen, Clint Hamilton, he's the athletic director at the University of Victoria right now, said, hey, Clint's getting married, and he's going to be away this summer. Would you like to work for the national team? And I said, yeah, hey, I love basketball. So I got to work with the national team just as I finished my degree. And my title was national teams coordinator, which was really, it was just being a gopher. But I got to hang around, our national teams practice. My primary responsibility as the summer went on that year was to actually look after the Yugoslavian national team. And at the time they had Vlade Divac, Toni Kukoc, Dino Raja, Zarko Pespal. These were all NBA guys, and they came into town, and my job was to look after them and I had my class 4 driver's license. I did that when I was doing my teaching practicum so I could take my teams to all kinds of tournaments. So my job was to drive the Yugoslavs all over, and just to see that level of basketball. At that time, they ended up being world champions, that group, and European champions. Was a very cool experience, but I got to see basketball at a higher level, and that started to intrigue me a little bit. And during that time, Ken was the coach, but Guy Vitry was an assistant with the national team, and so was Ken Olynyk, who ended up later on in later years, Ken ends up hiring me at Thompson Rivers University. But going back, I go up island to teach for a couple of years, and I'm coaching for a couple of years. And I can't remember, I was at a coach's clinic or something, and Guy Vitry said, "Hey, do you want to go for a run?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we put on our joggers, and I still like to run, but so we put on our runners and we went for a run. And he said, "Hey, why don't you apply to do your level 4 coaching certification, and you can also do your master's degree?" And so I looked at that and I thought, well, I'd like to do my master's degree. I can make a little bit more money teaching, and I'd like to become a better teacher and coach. So, on the advice, when I was working up in Nanaimo, I coached high school, but I also helped out Mark Simpson at that time. It was Malaspina College, and Mark's a great, my best friend, but a great coach, and was a mentor at that time. And he had gone through the coaching certification, and he recommended it. And so that's, was kind of my next step, was going to coach. And so I did that for a year with the University of Victoria, and started my master's, completed my level 4, and I was on a leave of absence from teaching. And I extended my leave of absence for a second year, and I was going to return to be the assistant coach at the University of Victoria again and complete my master's degree. But actually, I was in Indiana at the time working basketball camp. That's how you kind of made connections and learned the game, teaching it in different fashions. So I was actually can't remember whether I was in Bloomington, Indiana, or Evansville, Indiana. But I had a couple job offers, actually all on the same day. But I still probably was going to go back to the University of Victoria. But then Jay Triano called while I was actually in Indiana. My best friend, one of my better friends, James Hillis, who ended up coaching at the University of Regina, he ended up taking an interim job at Brandon University, and Jay had asked him to be the assistant. He said, "I can't. I've taken this job being the interim guy at Brandon." But he said, "Hey, Scott's a good guy." And Jay knew me. He'd recruited some of the kids that had played for me. So he said, "Hey, do you want to come be the assistant at Simon Fraser?" So I went and was the assistant coach at Simon Fraser for Jay for 1 year. And then my 2-year leave of absence was up. So I went back to teach high school for another year. And during that, what happened was I went over to Vancouver to watch for a coach's clinic, me and Mark Simpson. Again, I went back. I was teaching high school again, coaching high school and helping out at the college. And so we went, and Jay was speaking at the clinic. And so he asked me, and during that time I had helped Jay with the junior national team and obviously with Simon Fraser. And he said, "Hey, do you want to go for lunch?" I said, "Yeah, sure, let's go for lunch." And during lunch, he said, "Listen, I'm either going to be the athletic director or I'm moving to the Grizzlies. In either case, we'd like you to be the next coach at Simon Fraser." And that's kind of how I ended up being the head coach at Simon Fraser. I was 27 years old, and I probably, in retrospect, probably wasn't ready to be the coach there, but that's what happened.
I mean, that's an unbelievable story. Out of curiosity, there was one little part there that I wanted to focus on. You were in Indiana. How'd you get to what happened there to get you to Indiana? Why are you doing clinics in Indiana? Like North America's a big place. How's that happen?
Yeah, so I was kind of probably a fairly brash young guy. And what would happen is, so when I was working for Mark Simpson, we'd talk about the game of basketball and we'd watch a bunch of different teams play. And it started, and so I used to put on a whole bunch of one-man coaching clinics, bring in guys. So I brought in a guy named Hank Egan, who was the head coach of the University of San Diego at the time. And then I would go down and I would work camp for Hank in San Diego. And Hank was a very, very smart basketball guy. Ended up being an assistant with the San Antonio Spurs when they ended up winning. He actually he was at Air Force prior to being at the University of San Diego. There's another coach that was in the Air Force by the name of Greg Popovich. And so Hank and Pop are tight. And so when Pop went to, he wasn't the head coach at the time. Maybe he was the head coach. When Pop was the head coach, he ended up hiring Hank to be the assistant with San Antonio. Anyways, so I would go down, I'd work camp San Diego, and I'd go from San Diego up to Santa Monica, and then I'd go up to a place called Snow Valley basketball camp. It was on the campus of Westmont College, and I'd work in Santa Barbara. And then I'd go back home for a bit. And anyways, when I was Guy Vitri's assistant, one of the assistant coaches with our Canadian national team was a guy by the name of Jimmy Cruz. And Jimmy Cruz played at Indiana. He was part of the 1976 undefeated team, the last NCAA team to go undefeated. And Cruz was the head coach at Evansville, and he could really teach motion offense. And so I thought, well, let's bring up Jim to do a one-man clinic. And then as a result, Jim would say, hey, listen, why don't you come into Evansville and you can work camp, and you would work with a whole bunch of other really good coaches. In fact, I mean, there's a guy that's the head coach right now at Clemson named Brad Brownell. Brad Brownell was at that time, he was the student manager, or graduate assistant, I should say, at Evansville. He ended up going to a Division III place called DePauw, working for a guy named Royce Waltman. And Royce Waltman was an Indiana guy. So I'd work at Evansville for about 5-6 days. I'd spend a couple extra days just to kind of hang around with Jim and talk the game of basketball. And then I would actually go from Evansville to Bloomington and work Coach Knight's camp in Bloomington. And that's, again, how you met different guys and talked about the game of basketball. And it was a fun time being a young guy, in Indiana. And so, that's how I started learning the game, bringing different guys in, learning from them, and then being able to go to those places. And those guys, they had an impact on me as well.
Yeah, Bruce Eifert, I talk to him all the time. He talks about your one-man coaching clinics he really liked them. He was talking about them all the time. He's like, you get all the information that you could get out of somebody. What kind of gave you that idea to kind of start doing those? And then give me that, what it was like.
Well, I mean, we were talking about zone offense, Mark Simpson and I, one time, and we said, hey, there's this guy named Hank Keegan. We were like the zone offense. And so I was a brash young guy. I just picked up the phone and I said, hey, would you like to come to Nanaimo and put on a one-man coaches clinic? We'd ask you to speak for, I think I said 12 hours. I'll pay you this amount. I'll fly you in. And Hank came. And I can still remember picking him up at the Nanaimo airport and him getting off and saying, am I in like and he had served in the Air Force. And so he had been to Newfoundland. He said, am I anywhere close to Newfoundland? And I said, no, you're nowhere close to Newfoundland. And he said, well, where am I? And so, I was just a brash young guy. I just wanted to learn. And so I brought him in, and it was great. And then, like I said, I brought in Jimmy Cruz, Don Verlin, who was the head coach at Idaho, who I'd met at Snow Valley, actually. Snow Valley there was all kinds of good coaches at Snow Valley. Donnie Verlin was the assistant at Bakersfield and just won the Division II championship. He ended up being the head coach like I said, at Idaho. I met Tim Gergerich at Snow Valley. He was the assistant with the Sonics, and I was able to go down to watch practices with the Sonics at the time because I met him. My roommate at Snow Valley was a guy named Dave Severns. Severns and Gergs were tight. Severns is now the player development coach with the Clippers. So I was able to, have a little bit of develop a relationship there. The guy that ran Snow Valley was a guy named Herb Livesey. At the time, he was the overall player development director for I guess it was called the D League at the time, the Development League. The Van Gundys, Stan, Jeff, and the father that coached at Janice Junior College, Bill Van Gundy. They coached there. There was all kinds of really good coaches, and they demand. Herb ran an unbelievable camp, and you would have to start working at 5:30 in the morning teaching skill to kids, and if you were a young coach, you were always given the bad game times. Your game would finish at midnight, and then you would get back to your dorm room, and you'd have to be up at 5:30 the next day. And it was 6 days of camp, and I mean, Herb demanded a lot. I can remember they brought in a guy named Walt Hazard, who at the time had coached at UCLA, and he wasn't. Herb wasn't really happy with how. I'm all over the shop here, but Herb wasn't really happy with what Walt Hazard had done, and he took Walt Hazard. I can remember taking after the little teaching session, we'd have to go off to breakout groups, and I had to take my team out the Westmont front gym doors up to an upper court, and Herb wasn't really happy with what Walt had done at that time, and he was out there telling him, hey, listen, like and you did not want to let Herb down. So you learn to work hard and teach the game, with kids. And I still have my notes from camp there. Like one day of the camp, they would make you run zone. You'd have to run zone defense, and we taught zone offense. I still have my notes from the Van Gundys, because the Van Gundys were the guys that taught zone offense at the camp. And I still have the handout and the notes from them teaching zone offense. One of the guys that was working with us was a guy named Scotty Brooks, who at the time had just finished playing with the Houston Rockets, but now he's the head coach of the Washington Wizards, and was with I guess it was OKC before that, right? So I mean, just it's a small world, the game of basketball, and you just meet people along the way that open different doors. I met, Rick Majerus also used to work with the national team, and one of his assistants was a guy named Donnie Daniels. One year when I was at Simon, we went down and played Fullerton. And Daniels, I really liked the way Majerus taught a lot of things. So we brought Donnie Daniels in, as a one-man coach's clinic. He was a guy. Kevin Eastman, who runs Coaching U now. He was the head coach of the Washington State Cougars. I brought him in for a one-man clinic. So whenever I go down to Coaching U, I'll go up and say hi to Kevin. He was a really nice guy, did a really good job. He runs, that's a, worldwide coaches clinic now. At the time, he came in and did a one-man coaches clinic for us. So that was great. Steve McLean, who was the assistant at head coach at Wyoming, and that's where I kind of learned the Princeton was from him, because he was at Air Force. He was Jeff Bezdelik's assistant. Bezdelik's an assistant in the pros now with the Rockets, I believe. So just everybody kind of knows different guys, and those open doors. And I always wanted to learn more about the game, and that's how I got into the one-man clinics. It would be, if I wanted to learn, motion offense, well, let's bring in Jimmy Cruz. He's really good at it. Hey, we're looking at zone offense. Let's bring in Hank Egan, and he'll, you want to learn the Princeton, let's bring in Steve McLean. That's how I learned. That's a big part of how I learned a lot of the game of basketball.
Well, it just seems like it's really cool. Now I'm thinking I got to start a coaching clinic. We're gonna have to. Before you know it, you're gonna see a one-man clinic in North Van. So you get the job at 27. You get the job at Simon. Yeah. Geez, that's young. But you've got already quite a bit of experience. So most 27-year-olds probably don't have as much experience as you have. So you got this job. What's it like going in there first day and you're kind of in charge for running the show?
Yeah, the first thing was, I knew I had to get the players. Everybody talks about, I guess, the words buy-in and culture these days. But at the time, the players weren't much younger than me. So I needed to get the best players, to be with me. We needed to talk the same language. And two guys were really good. And Peter Garashi, who ended up coaching and being a head coach, he was a national team player at the time. I knew he was our best player, and I knew I needed to be able to get him to see. We had to see the game through the same eyes. And then the leader, was a guy named Sean O'Brien, who works for EA Sports. And he was a team captain. I needed to be able to get Sean, and the three of us, if we could be on the same page, we thought we could really do a good job with the rest of the team. And they really got the team to buy in. And it was, if those guys had been, I don't know, hard to deal with, as a young guy, it probably could have been the end of me, but it wasn't. They treated me very well. And, I'm forever thankful for those two guys. And then, from there on, they had an impact on Novell Thomas, who the next year was a fourth-year guy for me, who now is a women's coach at Brandon. And then, and so that just carried on. But it probably started with those two guys. And then, that way I was able to, have the ear of the team, I guess. And I certainly appreciated, what they were able to do for me.
So you get the job, first year is over, you're looking back. I'm sure you can probably remember like it was yesterday, maybe you can't, I don't know. But you look back at it and you're like, holy smokes, this was a stunning success and this was a complete, absolute disaster. What were your thoughts on how you had done and what it was like to actually have the job at that time?
Yeah, we had a reasonable amount of success. I had some really good players. Jay left me of a really good group of guys, and so at the end of the year we lost. We lost at the buzzer to Central Washington in the playoffs, which was a bit of a heartbreaker. But that happens. A guy I can still remember the guy's name, Lance Blankenship. He hit a unbelievable rainbow floater. I don't think that was the only 2 points he scored of the game. And it was over top of, Peter came over to contest it and he hit this big looper and it went in. And, and I guess, at the end of the day, it hurt. It really hurt, as being a young guy, but, hey, it's basketball. You dust yourself off and you move forward. And, when I worked for Jay, he let me do lots of things, whether it was recruiting, player development, all kinds of stuff. Took me back east to Ontario, introduced me to people recruiting. I had worked with Jay with the national team. So I had some contacts and things like that. Anyways, I just graduated a national team player who ended up, being the starting center in the 2000 Olympics, Peter Garashi. And I'm going, I need to get a good post player. I had Novell coming back, who ended up being a starting point guard, or not starting, sorry, backup point guard with the national team. So, at the time, Steve Anderson, who is now an administrator at Southridge, and coached out there, his younger brother, Richard Anderson, was graduating high school, and he said, hey, I think maybe you should look at my brother. And I said, yeah, sure. And his brother was being recruited for football. Richie was, at the time, graduating high school, 6'6". He was 292. Wow. I can still remember. So he came on a recruiting visit and was extremely raw, but just a physical specimen. And so he came in, he was 292 at the beginning of the season. He finished the season. We had to get him in shape. That's all I did. I didn't do much else. And he finished the season at 239.
Oh, wow.
And at 239, he was impressive. And he was physical. He had played football. He didn't mind. He would hit guys he didn't even know he hit them. And anyways, Richard ended up having a long pro career and also playing for the national team. And so, I've got a lot of wins. I got a lot of losses. But, a big part of those wins are, all those really good players that I coached: Tony McCrory, Sean Ramjagsing, Novell Thomas, Chris Gill, David Wall. I mentioned Peter and Richard, and I'm missing a whole bunch of guys. But those first couple of years, those are the guys that played for me. Steve Denny, who ended up being an assistant for me and now is a fireman. Those guys, they really made my job as a young coach easy. And looking back, I'm sure thankful for what they were able to do.
Do you remember a player or two that you thought was like a big time win in the recruiting battle when you were like fighting with somebody and you really wanted somebody bad? Do you remember one or two kids that kind of made a huge impact on your career that you weren't sure you were going to get, but you kind of pulled it off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a pretty bad recruiter, and Jay was a really good recruiter. I learned a little bit of that from being a recruiter from him, but probably David Wall, who transferred back from Ryder, was a big time recruit at the time. I mean, he was a 6'9", very talented guy, could really shoot it. I only coached Novell for 2 years, but I recruited him as being Jay's assistant, and I recruited him actually when I was Guy's assistant over at the University of Victoria. So, that obviously played out well. Richard was a big recruit. Brent Charlton, who ended up going on to be Simon Fraser's all-time leading scorer, was a big-time recruit. Aaron Christensen.
When you landed, let's talk about Brent for a second, because I'm from North End and I grew up watching him play. I mean, he was very, very good in high school. But did you think something like that do you think he would end up being one of the all-time greats in the history of the school?
I thought he was a very good shooter. I thought he was a very live athlete. He was very coachable his first couple of years, which I think, helped him immensely. And he came in at a time where there was some turnover, and he got to, I don't know if he started as a freshman, but he got to play a lot, maybe as a sixth man. I can't even remember, the group. I can't even remember the actual group of guys, but I think I recruited a whole bunch of young guys at that time, and he got to play a lot. I mean, he ended up leading the country in scoring his last year. But I mean, he's the all-time leading scorer. He beat, I think it was Jay's record. Jay did it in 4 years. Brett did it in 5 years, but I knew he was going to be a good player. I can't remember who else recruited him, but we beat out a couple places for him, and it worked out well for us. I think it worked out well for him as well.
So you're coaching at Simon. Things are actually going pretty good. Your team consistently, you guys are winning. I actually went to watch a lot of those games because it was the local team and you guys were entertaining. You had some big time studs, and you'd win 20 games quite frequently. You'd have a little dip, and then you'd be back to win a bunch of games. And then obviously the athletic director decided the school's going Div 2. And so that changes your life quite a bit, obviously. What made you decide you needed to go somewhere else?
Well, there were probably a number of factors, but, the first thing was, we had some success there. We had a really good group of kids. We just missed out on going to the national tournament. Sean Burke, Kevin Shaw, Matt Kosminski, who now coaches over at VIU, Chaz Cock, who is down in the States coaching and teaching now as well. Eric Burrell. Anyways, a really good group of kids. There were 11 guys, very committed group of kids. Jordan Nosted. Really, I graduated. It was a heavy turnover year, and looking at what was up ahead of us, I was ready to kind of tackle that. And so what happened was I was recruiting, and there was a kid named Jason Gamblin who I thought I was going to get. He's an American, and so I went to the athletic director, and I said, hey, I think I can get this guy. Can you sign this piece of paper on his scholarship? And the athletic director said, have you raised this much money yet to cover a scholarship? And I said, well, I'm not the guy that decided we're going Division II. The university decided we're going Division II, and I didn't think it was my job to come up with the resources to to be competitive. And he said, well, there's not going to be any more money allocated. And I said, oh. And, at that time I thought, well, it just, given my age, not that I was old, but I just thought I'm not ready to really, at the time kind of bash my head in. So that was, I just didn't think we had the resources to compete. There was an opening at Thompson Rivers, and I knew Ken Olenek from, for a long time. Again, going back to when I helped out the national team, all the way, and as I coached at Simon Fraser, our teams had played him when he was at the University of Toronto. And so I put my hat into the ring, thinking that maybe that might work out. I knew Ken. I was a Kelowna guy that would allow me to get a little bit closer. My kids were of the age. My oldest son was just graduating high school, and our youngest was was just going into the 12th grade. So, but the timing was good in terms of moving, and all those factors just kind of indicated that probably this is if we're going to move, this would be the time to move. And I wasn't sure that we had the resources to be successful at Simon Fraser. And I thought that I would get fired, to be quite honest. And so, I made the move to Thompson Rivers and up to Kamloops. And, we're quite happy that we did that, both at.
Well, it's turned out really well. But when you got there, I believe they won one game, right? I mean, there's a dramatic difference between when you got to Simon, the team was kind of loaded, you're ready to go, and you just had to kind of carry it on and keep the train going. At Thompson Rivers, there really wasn't any history of success, and you had to kind of start from scratch. That's got to be a big adjustment at that time, but give me a little rundown of what that was like.
Well, they had won 2 games.
Okay.
I just kind of thought, well, they won 2 games. I mean, if I win 3 games, I'm probably a hero. And at the end of the year, my first year, we won 4 games. And I can remember, people coming up and saying, hey, nice job, 4 wins. That's really good. And I mean, it bothered me I don't think I'd ever won just 4 games before. It was a difficult season. But I thought, I looked at the situation and Ken, and thankfully, Ken believed in me. But working for Ken was great. I liked the university. I thought it had some things to offer. It had resources. It had, I thought a budget that allowed us to compete. It was an institution that where guys could get their degrees and offered a number of programs. The facilities were great. I thought I had something to sell, that the institution was behind moving things forward. Again, going back, at Simon, I said to the athletic director at the time, hey, I wasn't the guy that decided this, and the institution's not giving us the resources to be successful. I thought the resources were in place here. So that allowed that, kind of, we moved forward coming here, and it ended up being a bit of a tough road. But I think we went from 4 wins to, 6, 8, and then I thought we could kind of get it turned around in 3 years. It actually took 4 years for us to get it turned around. But since that time, we've probably been fairly competitive, and it's fun. I enjoy it.
Well, you had a team a couple of years ago. I mean, it seems like yesterday, but it was probably 4 or 5 years ago when UBC hosted nationals. You had one of the better teams in the country. That had to be, obviously, you lost a tough one there in that game. I went to that game as well. But to go from 2 wins to competing for a national championship, we're talking, that's a big deal, man. What was it like to kind of like look back at it and be like, hey, we've come a long way here?
Well, I mean, I think that, the first thing is, Coach Pop, you know, it's got a little saying there that, you know, when nothing else seems to, when everything's going wrong and nothing seems to help, you look at a stonecutter who's hammering away on his rock, and you know that it wasn't that blow that made it crack in two, but, you know, perhaps he hammers away 100 times, and it's not, and on the 101st blow, it cracks. And it wasn't that blow that did it, but everything that had come before. You know, and just along those lines, I think that, you know, there's a lot that, first off, you know, that group of the first year, I mean, they busted their tail, and I mean, we only won 4 games, but, you know, that it starts with those guys. I mean, it would be wrong of us to just say, hey, that one team was great. Those other kids paved the way. The other coaches paved the way. Del Kormaniski, Ken Olenek, Mark Simpson, Joe Envelson, who's now a head coach, was my assistant. Ted Murray, who is a current assistant of mine. Those, you know, all the players and coaches put a tremendous amount of energy in, and it was very fulfilling to see things get there. And you know, when we won, when we went to the national tournament, we played. I mean, I'll go off on a little tangent. We played UBC in the Canada West semifinals, and so we're set to play them on a Friday. Thursday night, we go out to the airport in Kamloops, and we're gonna get on the plane. Our flight's at 3:00. We get out there at about. They don't want you. It's a small airport. They don't want you out there too early. So we get out there about 2:00, maybe 1:45. And we go to check in, and they say, hey, listen, there's no plane. And it was really high winds, and there was just no plane. They said, hey, we can't fly out. And I said, why? I guess we'll book tomorrow. And they said, no, the flights are tomorrow are sold out. You can't get a flight. So I went over to WestJet and put down my credit card, and I booked a flight from Kamloops to Calgary, because Calgary was hosting the Canada West Final Four. And so we're going to fly WestJet. And the flight's at, I don't know, 4:30. About 3:30, the WestJet lady comes up and says, high winds in Calgary, the plane's not coming this way, you can't fly, and there's nothing tomorrow. So we call our administrative assistant, Camilla, and anyways, we get a bus. By the time the bus leaves Kamloops, we leave at, I think, about 6:30 at night. We're going to play at 4:00 the next day, because Calgary is hosting, you know, men's basketball, but it was also maybe volleyball, or, you know, so the games it was 4 and 6 or something like that. So we get on a bus and we pull into Calgary. I believe it's 2:30 a.m. by the time we get into, and we got to play the next day. No shoot practice. We have a little walkthrough in the hotel lobby, and we go out. I mean, and it's a you know, UBC is a very tough, talented team, well coached, and it's a bit of a backstreet brawl, and we take the lead. You know, I mean, I think we're down 2.5, but we take the lead. It's a seesaw affair, and we take the lead. We go up pretty good, maybe with 2-3 minutes left. UBC had the last shot to win. We forced a miss, and we won. Anyways, you know, where I'm going with this is we won, and we shook UBC's hand. I walked off the floor, and the first guy to greet me was Ken Olenek, and he's a huge man, and he grabs me and he hugs me, and my feet go right off the ground, and I'm just dangling there. And so I walked out, and I thought, yeah, this is it. Like, not just for me, but for everybody. You know, it was cool.
And yeah, you had a great team that year. I mean, I like watching you guys play. You guys play tough. You had a couple transfers come back. It was a nice team to watch. There's a lot of, and there was some local talent that made an impact on the team, like which you don't see too often from Kamloops. But it was fun to kind of, you know, watch that journey and then get to go play locally. You guys actually brought a lot of people to your games. I still remember that, like the orange T-shirts, and it was fun for sure.
Yeah, they brought bus loads down, and you know, that's cool thing about being in a small community. And you know, that's when you're recruiting guys, you're saying, hey, listen, we're a small school, but hey, we're just going to get our guys and they're going to line up their guys. And I think we can beat them. And it worked out that way. And I mean, we had, it started with, some guys came back to play, and I mentioned that fourth year, Talon Milne, who's now a physiotherapist in Salmon Arm, came back to play here, and he played for me at Simon Fraser, and then he wanted to do some graduate work here, and then I had coached Kevin Probilski at Simon Fraser, and when I left Simon Fraser and came to Thompson Rivers, Kevin transferred as well, and his brother played at the University of Victoria, but had ran into some academic issues, and so he said, hey, I think you should recruit my brother, and I said, okay. And I told you I'm a notorious bad recruiter, and the guys all bug me when you go back to their weddings and things like that now, because I recruited him, and I said, hey, I hope you come to school here, but I mean, if you don't come to school here, and it's honestly my philosophy. I'm a basketball coach. I love basketball. But at the end of the day, it's putting the ball through a ring. And so I said, hey, I hope you come. But if you don't come, I mean, it'll be okay. Life will go on for you, and it'll go on for us. Of course, now when we're at those weddings and the guys have had a couple of drinks, they say, yeah, well, hey, you dropped them off and said, yeah, come or don't come. We don't give two craps what you do. Or, like they embellish it a whole bunch. But Reese came, and that was, he was kind of a ringleader, a real charismatic kid, a tough competitor, fearless, to the point of almost being a little crazy on the court sometimes. And then when he came, Josh Wolfram also had some academic issues. He had been at the University of Calgary, a local kid, very talented, 6'10", ended up playing on our student national team. And those guys were the, better players, but what ended up really probably putting us over the edge was Vladimir Igorov from the Ukraine. And, that was just a total luck situation. I tell people, sitting there watching open gym, and there's a women's volleyball player, Yulia Pakamenko, came up, and she said, hey, I've got a friend that would like to play here. And I said, oh, yeah. Is he any good? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, how good is he? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, who's he better than that's out there playing right now? And she said, well, he's better than all your players. And so she showed me, videotape, and, he ended up being a very good basketball player. I mean, 6'7", 6'6", 240, physical, shoot it, bounce it, really tough competitor. And, and we had a great run with those guys. Everything worked out for that team, but more importantly for me, everything worked out for Reese. He got his degree. He's engaged. He's getting married. Josh again had some academic issues. He's gotten his degree, and is off and running in the professional world. And then going to Vladimir. Vladimir came. He got his master's degree in accounting. Got an accounting job. And you feel good. You feel good from a standpoint of what's going on with basketball. But hey, we're not only were we able to deliver on what we said we could do for a guy with basketball, but what we could do for a guy in perhaps helping him along his career path. And at the end of the day, Josh ended up being a pro playing overseas, but Reese is a professional working in Calgary. I mentioned Vladimir, a professional accountant. I'm proud of all those guys. Talon's a physiotherapist. I've had a number of good players that have played professional, but I've also had a number of good people that have played for me that are now professionals. That whether it's Raj Mandar, who's VPD.
I coached Argyle when Burke and Shaw were there. They're both doing spectacular things. I mean, the list goes. You got a long list there for sure. Yeah. Reese, I actually coached the provincial team when the girls team when Reese was doing U15, and he was the best point guard in the province that year, and he was special. It was fun watching him play when he was 15. I was like, holy smokes, this guy's got it. And I remember talking to him about his routine of what I'm like. He's got a pretty good handle for somebody your age. What are you doing? He's like, I dribble every day for half an hour. What the hell are you talking about? He's like, every day. I go, where? Where are you doing this? It's in my basement. But what do you mean in your basement? He's like, I got two. I start 2 ball. I go 1 ball. He goes, I'm doing it every day. I go, holy smokes. I go, it makes sense. You can play. So I mean, watch it. It was kind of fun for me watching him play because we actually got along. I talked to him because I was like, your game's pretty good for a little kid from the island. Like I want to see what happened here. And then he kind of flourished down the stretch of his career. So that was kind of cool to watch.
Well, just a very, competitive family. Like him and his brother were competitive, and, to the point of like, we have to, shooting contests and just raving at each other. And, but he was a very brash guy, a good player, but, an even better leader. And he's the guy that, like I said, I think some other guys followed because he came, and hey, the reason we won is because we had good players, and they were really good guys. They were eager to fall in line, and but they were coachable, and they were competitive. I still remember in the summertime taking my team to play. It was July, I believe. And we played a really good team. I can't even remember who it was, but we played and we lost a tight one. And we walked off the court, and the guys, it was an outdoor tournament. They're sitting down in the grass. And I think a lot of the kids, had felt content because, hey, we just played a really good team. We lost a tight one. And, going from some of these guys that were on that team that had gone from 2 wins and, hey, now we're up to being a playoff team. And now we're playing with a really good team. We lost them. And I can remember us, just sitting there and say, hey, does anybody got anything they want to add right now? And we said, yeah, hey, I hope nobody is happy about losing. Like, hey, that was a good team, but I don't give 2 shits. Hey, we lost. We don't want to lose. And, as a coach, it's like, hey, I don't have to do a heck of a lot here. I just got to kind of keep this on the rails. Don't get in their way too much. Try to manage their workloads a little bit. That year that we ended up going to the national tournament, we played a lot of zone because we were big and we weren't very deep. But I couldn't have guys running around, expending all kinds of energy, getting tired. So I just managed their load a little bit. But they were the guys that they did the job, and it certainly was fun.
So let's say I'm a break. You multiple times you mentioned that you're not a very good recruiter, but let's move past that for a second. Let's pretend I'm a pretty good player, and we're having our Zoom here, and you got to sell me on Thompson Rivers. What's the sales pitch on what I'm getting there? Considering there's a whole bunch of variables. I got a lot of schools I'm going to. What's kind of the deal that I need to know about Thompson?
Well, I think the first thing that is, I try to say, I try to really go out of my way to explain to the young man what my value system is. And, if your value system jives with my value system, then I think this is a pretty good marriage. I think it is the same as marriage. If your value system jives with the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, then I think, that's a good relationship. But if your value systems don't jive, you're going to run into trouble down the road. And so no matter how good the player is, I need to, first off, before I decide to recruit that young man, I have to know that he's a person of high character. If his character is in question, I simply won't recruit that player no matter how good he is. Maybe if I was being paid $4 million a year, I could look past some of that stuff, but I'm not. I'm happy with what I get paid, but it has to be fun for me. And the only way it's fun is if we're on the same page. So I try to really go through things to say, this is how I view the game of basketball, and what I'm trying to teach. And it's not just what we're trying to teach with basketball, but, going a full 360 in our conversation here. But what I'm trying to teach you At some point, your jumper is going to dry up. Again, I wasn't a great player, but I was an okay player. My jumper is terrible now. But there are a whole bunch of things that are, going on between my ears, those characteristics that I think I learned through the game of sport, whether it's from my teammates that I grew up with, played with, really good players in high school. I mean, one guy's coming to play for me this next year, Jaden Lalonde. His dad, Al Lalonde, was a junior national team player. Mike Clark. I played with a bunch of really good players in Kelowna. Anyways, again, I'm all over the shop, but I need to go and I need to explain. These are, at some point, your jumper is going to dry up, but the characteristics that you've learned through your teammates, your coaches, your experiences, those things they should last after your jumper is gone. And at the end of the day, I think what I feel good about a lot of times is, hey, when Greg Wallace gets married, I'm invited to his wedding. Sean Burke, Kevin Shaw, Matt Kosminski, Kevin Perbilski, Brett Rewalt, who I was just at it. Anyways, those, I think, that what it is we saw things through the same light we tried to really vet those recruits by judging their character above anything else. We know they could play, and then explaining what our value system is and is this going to be a good relationship? And maybe, as I've gotten older, I think I've done a better job of being able to do those things above selling the university or myself. I mean, there is some selling in recruiting, but I just try to say, hey, look, this guy was a pretty good player. He played here. Things went okay for him. And and these are my values, and if your values jive with my values, then I think that you could have a good time here. If they don't jive here, hey, no worries. It's no problem. You shouldn't come here. You should go somewhere else, and I'm not saying my values are right or wrong or whatever. They are what they are. But I think that's probably, where, we were talking about transfers. Hey, am I a better coach than, where that guy came from? No, it's just maybe a bit better fit. And that fit might be, one, there's some playing time, but two, maybe the way I view things is a little bit better suited for that young man than maybe where his previous institution. And so, going back to recruiting, I think the product sells itself. I think the university sells itself, whether it's the facilities, the degree, the residents, the community, the team. I think all that sells itself. I obviously think you're a good player. Now, can we have a relationship where we coexist, where I can help you get better, and you can help us get better, and it's a good relationship. I think that, the selling part, the product speaks for itself. And when I talk to kids, I kind of talk to them about I'll say it's a house or a car, and there's all kinds of different factors that go into buying a car. I tell them, hey, do you want a sports car, SUV, a crossover, a full-size pickup, small-size pickup, black, red, white, four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, four-cylinder, six-cylinder, eight-cylinder? And at the end of the day, you have to make them aware of what your university offers. Just like buying a car, there's all kinds of things out there. You're buying a university, there's all kinds of things out here. You're from the Lower Mainland. Do you want to get away from home? Then, hey, or hey, no, I want to stay close to home. Hey, no problem. Then you shouldn't look at our school. It's just like buying that car. There's a whole bunch of different factors. You got to determine what factors are most important for you, and if we have those factors, then I think it ends up being a good spot for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us a quick rundown on what hopefully we get to play some games. Give us a quick rundown on what you think your team will look like next year.
Yeah, we're young. I think we're talented. Um, you know, it's difficult for me. Like normally in a normal year, going back to the pandemic here, normally what would happen a lot of times is we would be out, recruiting. I'd be out. I'd bring guys in for um, I'd bring them in for testing. We have a golf tournament, and when we're having a golf tournament, they come in and we test them to see how they're doing physically. We'd be playing some games at different um, venues, and I'd get to see how they're progressing, what their game is, how they fit. That's not happening this summer. Normally we'd probably play 12, 14 games in the months of July, August. It's not happening. I didn't bring them in June to see how their training was going. So coming in September, it's going to be it'll be a bit of a surprise to me. We have Zoom meetings to see how their training's going. We talk about things, but there's, I guess it's young and I talented, but how it'll come together, I'm operating behind the 8 ball on that.
Yeah, for sure. So let's do the last question for you. So if you could go back in time, you're obviously still a young guy, but if you can go back and give young Scott a little bit of advice, what would you tell him to kind of set him on the right path?
Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes as a basketball coach. And going back to what we were talking about, I think that, when I was young, my competitiveness would get the best of me, whether that's as a player or whether it's as a coach. And when, as a coach, and I have a set of principles, and sometimes, or principles or values. And when I was younger, I bastardized those principles or values sometimes, whether it was to get a player or to do certain things. And, those are things that you're not proud of, but you learn from them, I think. And, I think that if I was to talk to a young coach, I'd say, well, let's start with a philosophy here. What do you want to get accomplished with your team? What do you want your team to look like? How do you want it to play? And then how are you going to teach it? Through your philosophy, through your values and principles, how are you going to teach those characteristics? We're not talking about anything about the game of basketball, but those other characteristics that will last the guy's lifetime. And, again, I don't ask for anybody's sympathy. I made mistakes in bastardizing my principles because I thought it would get us a couple extra wins, and it probably did, but it probably got me in hot water. And the thing I think I'd say to young guys is you really need to have a set of principles and values and follow those. I think, a cliche type of thing now, whether we're talking about basketball, athletics, or business, would be value-based decision-making, making decisions based upon your values. And so, first off, you have a set of values, follow those values. Don't bastardize those values. Don't go against those values. Stay true to yourself. And at the end of the day, if things go well or they don't go well, I think you can feel good about what you do. Again, I've said I've probably, gone against my values, and it probably got us a couple extra wins, but I never felt good about it. And that's when I was a younger guy. I think as I've evolved as a coach, I've been able to stay a lot more true to those values and principles, and and it served me well. I think it served the athletes well and the teams well. And I think that would, when the shit hits the fan, if you've stayed true to those values and principles, I think, I think you can feel good about it. And it makes when the waters seem muddy, it clears things up. And
clarity ends up taking you where you want to go in the first place anyway, so it all works out in the end.
Yeah, And I guess, I am getting old actually. I mean, I'd like to, I mean, I, I'm probably, I've learned some things along the way. I mean, I still got a little bit of life left in me as a coach, but, I'm thankful for all the mistakes that I made. I mean, I think I've learned from them. And I mean, there were times maybe I thought I was going to get fired. I didn't get fired. Um, and I tried to grow from that and be a better coach. I think that I have become a better coach because of those things. And I wouldn't probably change a heck of a lot, even though I know that I messed some things up back then. It's part of growing and who you are and who I am today.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think there was definitely some good tidbits, and I appreciate you sharing your story. And hopefully somebody else will listen to this and they'll learn something for themselves. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, and hopefully I didn't bore the crap out of people.
No, I'm good, man.